Welcome to Primary Sources from the Library of Congress and more to your classroom. I'm Julie Erickson, a learning specialist at TIE, and today we're going excuse me, today we're going to be talking about online primary resources and more for your classroom. We're going to do a quick intro on what are primary sources, just so we have we're all on the same page. Some examples for using primary sources, and really the majority of our time is going to be spent on primary sources and where to find them. The Library of Congress gives this definition for primary sources. They're the raw materials of history, original documents and objects which were created at the time under study. They are different from secondary sources and accounts or interpretations of events created by someone without firsthand experience. What I really like about the concept of primary sources and secondary sources is when you start actually looking into them, you have something that may be a secondary source, such as a textbook. If you are looking at the time period when that textbook was written, that textbook as a secondary source may be a primary source. And so there's a lot of different ways you can interpret what's a primary source and what's a secondary source. So that's kind of exciting. I'm assuming most people know that the South Dakota Social Studies standards were approved in August, and so we have new social studies standards coming down. And one of the things that they're doing is they are going to take into account the C3 framework, which is critical thinking, communication, inquiry, and the problem-solving aspect. And so it's very exciting because that's a national framework that we can, it's not a curriculum, but it includes a number of ways of looking at the content. Here's the C3 framework, and here is a chart that, and I'm going to take us straight out to this website. Lauren Brown is a professor, and she speaks at a national level about these, about the framework, and she put together this chart. And it is fabulous because the C3 framework is a multi-page document. She's 108 pages, she says. And so trying to go through the C3 framework and understand all of the tie-ins with the South Dakota Social Studies standards, the C3 framework, this chart is very helpful, and it links back to the pages and the information. And so as you're going into the new South Dakota Social Studies standards and needing more of an understanding of the C3 framework, this is a great tool. The other great tool that's out there is the South Dakota has disaggregated the standards, the social studies standards. And so here's our resources page for today. And when we're on today's resource page, I do link you out to the social studies standards. And so we're actually linked straight to the standards. If you go back to the DOE page, the doe.sd.gov, and I'll add this to our page also when we're done. We have the content standards, and this is where all of the standards are listed, but if we scroll down, the social studies standards are here, and they've just recently added the disaggregated standards. And so what's great about this is we can go in and look at the disaggregated standards for whatever grade we're interested in. And so say we pick on high school geography, because I've been looking there. If we click on any one of them, they are a Word document. And when you bring them up, they give you not only the the standard, they give you student-friendly language, they give you the know, understand, and do for each standard, but they also give you the C3 framework, relevant skills and applications, along with the Oshedi essential understandings. And so there are there's quite a bit of information in the disaggregated standards that'll help you as you're looking at the new social studies standards. So that's a good thing to be aware of out there. So going back to my PowerPoint. So here's a C3 framework. One of the other things that the C3 framework talks a lot about is developing the compelling questions. And I don't know if you've heard of Glenn Wiebe. He's a social studies teacher and speaker from Kansas, and he's talked a lot about compelling questions in some of the sessions I've heard him talk on. And this is from a blog of his where he helps discuss developing compelling questions, which is where primary sources can really take a role. And so if we go back to the resources page, we have a link out here to his compelling questions post, that 300 sample compelling questions. And so when we're looking at the new social studies standards, if you're trying to come up with compelling questions, he has a whole post on that. And at the very bottom of his post, he has links out to different lists of compelling questions that you can use. So I thought that was always kind of nice. So into primary source documents. One of the things with primary source documents is they're challenging sometimes because they can be hard to read because they're written in cursive. One of the things that you want to, but what's nice is there's a ton of different resources that can help you help your students understand primary source documents. So here's an example, and this is from the Smithsonian Institute, and it was part of the original Thinkfinity program on tips for reading documents. And so you have your first impressions. What are your first impressions? What kind of document is it? Looking more closely, can you make a list of any unusual words or phrases? Is there a date? And on the DIGO list, I've given a number of different ways to utilize primary source documents. And if we go down, you'll see a number of different examples on how to incorporate them and with different tools. And we'll get into that in a couple minutes. So know that there's lots of tips for using them in many of the resources we talk about today. So for example, we went out to the Library of Congress and brought in this picture of workmen carving George Washington's face on Mount Rushmore. And this is kind of cool because if you look, there's a lot that you can observe in this picture. And so even if you did observation, you could see how many people were working, what kind of tools do you see, what kind of what do you observe, what's written on the picture there. It looks like there's something written on the picture. There's just an awful lot of things that you can observe. What's in the background, it looks like there's something dark. Why does it appear dark? And so we could have a big discussion on that. When we did the Digging Deeper into Primary Sources at the State Library last spring, the day-long online conference on primary sources, Jean Patrick spoke. She spoke about how when she wrote the book, Who Carved the Mountain, the story of Mount Rushmore, she interviewed people up about Rushmore, including some of the people who had done the carving and the staff up at Mount Rushmore. And it was fascinating. And what was really neat was Mount Rushmore actually gave her some of the drills to take into the classrooms with her when she went and spoke to classrooms about the book. And she said it made such an impact to bring in these primary sources. And so it's kind of cool to have the opportunity to be able to bring in primary sources into your classroom, and how it can make the topic that you're talking about seem real. And so when you go back and look at the picture that we were looking at of Mount Rushmore, and then think about, it doesn't, the people look really small, but you don't really have any concept. And then you bring in this big of a drill and show them, oh my gosh, this is the size of the drill that they were using. That can really help cement the magnitude of the Mount Rushmore project. So where can we find some physical primary source resources? There's just a ton of resources in South Dakota. We are so lucky. The Journey Museum has their trunks. Those are available for a checkout period for us for a nominal fee. And they have a ton of different topics that you can pick from. And if you look at the DIGO list, we have scrolling down the page, we have where to find primary sources in South Dakota. And so the Journey is listed on there, and you can actually go in and see all the different kind of trunks that they have. The South Dakota State Historical Society also has a large number of education trunks. Their trunks I really like because not only can you click on all of these different titles, but they tell you the contents of the trunk, but they also they give you the lesson plans and other information associated with the trunk. And so that has been really positive for using the trunks. So you have a lot of information there that you can use. So and then in Sioux Falls, they too have trunks at the Siouxland Heritage Museums that you can check out. And they have a number of different topics. We have the furs. My favorite was the lower right-hand corner was the pioneer times. And then the center one had some skulls and different items from a buffalo. And so there's a lot of different trunks available out there that can be checked out. The other thing I wanted to point out is I gave you the South Dakota Museum directory too, because even if you don't live in proximity to one of the three that we talked about, you can see if there's a museum in your region that would be willing to work with you to bring in actual primary sources. The Game Fish and Parks also has critter crates if you're interested in looking at those. And the South Dakota Discovery Center has their great explorations in math and science, and they too have some really great resources that you can check out and bring into your classroom. So you have some really nice options available to you if you're interested in bringing physical primary sources into the classroom. So now to the online options. The Smithsonian is a phenomenal resource when we're looking at primary sources. And so I'm going to go back from here. I'm going to work off of our list here because I've linked them all on our list. So if we go here on the Smithsonian source, these guys give you tons of teacher resources, so you have tips for using the resource. You can actually go down and watch a video on the artifact, or we can go in and look at by historical topic. And so we can click in, if you click the tab at the top of the page, Teaching with Primary Sources, you can say here if we want to do compare and contrast. We have a video, we have a lesson plan, and so you have a number of different options that you can look at.
Standards. Do you want to watch it or just watch the recording when she's done? It's really good. I'm the only person.
And so that's just a really nice option that you have access to in the compare and contrast here for the Smithsonian source. So there's a ton here that you can have access to. If we go back to our list of resources here, we also have the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress is just a wealth of primary source resources. Obviously, they're the Library of Congress, so they're going to have a lot, but they have a lot for the educator. So when we're on their website, you can go to teachers and using the primary sources. And so from here, we have information on why we'd want to use primary sources, citing primary sources, copyright. But then as we get into it even further, so if we go over to the, on the left-hand side and click on classroom materials, we have primary source sets. And so those are just sets on a specific topic. So if we click onto that, we could go in and scroll through any number of the different topics here. And so you have music, you have the Constitution, the Dust Bowl. So you can go in and explore the primary source sets. You also have lesson plans. And the lesson plans you can review by topic, by era, or just A to Z. And so if you were looking for, something on Civil War, we could go in and we could see all the Civil War lesson plans. We could click on any one of them. It would bring up the lesson overview, the objectives, the time required, and then the grade level, the topic, credits. And so we could go in and here's our prep. It gives us, they have a number of tools, the primary source analysis tool. And there's an online version where I can fill it out online. And so if the students are on the computer, they can fill it out online. You can fill it out and then email it if you wanted to the teacher, or they could email it to themselves, or they could print it, or they could download it when they were done with it. Notice you can also print out the PDF version of the primary source analysis tool. And so that's just one of the many tools that are available out there. So in addition to the lesson prep here, it also is going to show us the gallery of images. And so we have all the images for our Women in the Civil War student resources. And then we have the teacher's guide for analyzing primary sources, and then finally using primary sources. It's going to give you the procedure where you actually have all the activities laid out. And then my favorite is it gives you an evaluation. And some of them are going to have more in-depth evaluation than others. This one doesn't have as much, but some of them will have an actual rubric that you can use. As you go down the left-hand side of the page, there's also professional development. And so you can go through and look at some of the options that they have. They have online modules, and if you go in and look at those, you can actually, if you want to, get an intro to the Library of Congress or learn more about copyright, you can actually go through any of these online modules and take those. So that's the teacher component of the Library of Congress. If you notice at the top of the page in the black bar, we have our where we're at. I want to take us back to the Library of Congress homepage and just point out a couple of the other options here. We have collection highlights, and so you can actually go in and say you wanted to look at films or maps. You could just go in by the collection highlights like that. Notice that we have, especially for kids and families, and so if you're working with younger grades, the kids and families is a great place to go because it's going to have resources that are specific for, really pulled out for kids. And so we have like the Young Readers Center and places in history and things that may be more relevant to younger children or useful all across the K-12 curriculum. So that's the Library of Congress, just a couple of the things there. Some of the other resources that are out there, Ed Citement from the National Endowment for the Humanities has phenomenal tools for analyzing primary sources. And so you can actually go in and get a number of guides from everything on close reading. They have close reading webinars. So you have some tools here for using those primary sources in your classroom. Back to Glenn Wiebe. He has some suggestions for integrating primary sources in your classroom. And if you like Glenn, he's coming up on the 20th. He'll be speaking at the next Digging Deeper. And then we also have an archive with a couple sessions of his that you can actually go in and listen to in the Digging Deeper into Primary Sources archive. And so that's, this is the archive from last spring's Digging Deeper into Primary Sources Day. And you can go back in and every session is recorded. So here we have Glenn Wiebe's opening keynote. And if you click on the archive there, you have the recording, you have the PowerPoint, and then you also have links in the session. And so anytime you are looking for more primary source resources, this is a good place to check it out. Let's see. So those are just a few of the options. Oh, there's a couple other options I wanted to show you on the online, the free resources. Free Technology for Teachers, Richard Byrne, posts awesome technology resources. And this last week, he did a number of posts on primary sources, which was really exciting. He has 10 resources for teaching with primary sources. And he links out to a Common Craft video explaining the difference between primary and secondary, a number of other resources. And then I fell in love with, let's see if I can find what I fell in love with. There was, under teaching history, they have posters for elementary school and for high school. The elementary one is called Doing History is Like Solving a Mystery. And this is an interactive poster. And so while it's kind of small on the screen, and I thought, oh, that's not very useful, when you click on any quadrant, it brings it up and there's interactive bubbles. And so I can click on any one of these interactive bubbles. What did kids do in the past? And so then I can learn more. And then there's actually a teaching resource that go along with the learn more. What kinds of toys did kids play with? Here's learn more, and then I also have teaching resources. And then I can go back to the poster and I can click in any one of the other quadrants. And so I thought that was a really fun, interactive, historical thinking poster. And he has one for high school too. History is an argument about the past. And so we can go in, and this one is examine source information. And so there's a number of, we can learn more about primary sources, and each time there's a resource for the student and there's also a resource for the teacher. So I thought that was pretty fun. So I'm going to take us back to the PowerPoint now. Oops. And I want to talk about a couple of other resources that are available. The South Dakota State Library has digital collections where they have scanned the government documents and other government materials like the governor's inaugural message, the legislative manuals, the blue books. We also have a number of documents from various agencies. This is free, and so you can actually go in and access this without having to log into anything. It's the entire document is scanned as it is. And so it's an excellent way to have primary source materials to be able to go back and look at how it was worded, how it is formatted, any of that. And so the South Dakota State Library digital collections are a great tool if you're looking for primary source documents. And then the South Dakota State Library provides a wide range of subscription resources that are available to all schools in South Dakota. You have direct access when you're inside your school, and then your librarian has a barcode and password that can be used for at-home access. We're just going to talk about the few that have primary source resources in them today. Ancestry Library, World Book Advanced, Heritage Quest, Gale Virtual Reference Library, and Digital Sanborn Maps. Gale Virtual Reference Library is the one I'll start with. Those are full-text online reference books. They cover many areas, including health, history and government, law, education, business. All of their articles have read-aloud citation tools, downloadable PDFs, and MP3s. But we also have a number of primary source titles within them. There's American Decades Primary Sources, which is a 10-volume set that covers a variety of topics from 1900 to 1999. And then there's Terrorism, Essential Primary Sources, which is a 1-volume set dealing specifically with the topic of terrorism. There's also primary sources can be found in other titles too, but these are the two titles that focus solely on primary sources. Here's an example of an eyewitness account of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire from the American Decades book. We have the tools that we can highlight, citation tools, print, email, download, but we also have background information to give us context on what's going on. Here we have a floor map of the factory, and so you can see the images, and we also have text. It's a primary source here. And here's another example of a primary source, and this one is from Cold War Biographies, and it's an article about John F. Kennedy. A search for the Cuban Missile Crisis yield this result, where we have the actual excerpt from the report. World Book Advanced is the World Book that we know and love, and in Advanced, not only do you have a teaching with documents, you also have primary sources, ebooks and photos. So once we're in World Book Advanced, which it is now iPad friendly, and so everything, it looks the same on all devices, you'll want to do Take Me To, and it comes with a drop down, and you can click on Teaching with Documents, and you'll end up with an option to go in and get the background on a topic, and then when you actually click on the image, it'll give you the actual image, the full text image. So here we're looking at the Homestead Act, and if we click on the image, it brings it up so that we can see what the Homestead Act looked like. In addition, just searching in World Book Advanced, you'll have the option. Notice that when we searched here for Crazy Horse, we have 16 encyclopedia articles and 1 primary source. And so when we're in here, we can see if there are any primary sources that come up relevant to the topic that we're looking for. Ancestry Library is the ancestry that we know and love. Ancestry Library can only be accessed inside your school or library, though. It cannot be accessed at home. And what you've got within Ancestry are you have census records, but you also have immigration, military, birth, death, photos, yearbooks, international records, and so much more. So it is full of primary source documents. And you don't have to necessarily search for family. You can search for famous people. For example, who do we have here? Pa Ingalls. And so this results, many results, including the 1880 census record. And if you look at the transcript, it tells us a little bit about it, that we can see his gender, his spouse's name, a little bit about it, and then it helps make it more readable, definitely. And then we also have some suggested records where we may find him in other censuses or other records. And then if we go actually in and look at the record, we get the actual record. Notice the red arrow, we have Charles Ingalls, and then you can see all of the other household members at that time. You also have the option to notice the orange button, send the document home. And so if you have, you can only access this in school or in the library. If you wanted to, you could send this document home, so you can send it to your email and access it again later. So it's a nice way to save a document if you need to. Heritage Quest recently underwent a facelift, and so they look a little different than they have traditionally. Heritage Quest is available from home, and so you can search your census, you can search full text of scanned history, local history ebooks. We have cemeteries, we have city directories, we have military records, we have immigration records. In addition, you have a couple of other resources here. We'll take a quick look at the family history books and directories. When you go in and search, and what we've done here is we've limited to publications, so we're not necessarily searching for people, we're just looking for titles. We're looking for a diary, since that would be a great primary source. And when we did that with the subject of Civil War, we came up with a number of results that their diaries with the Civil War. When we go in them, you actually get the full text of the document, so we could actually read through this Civil War diary. We also have, let's see, what do we have here? We also have a couple of other resources in Heritage Quest. This is the Revolutionary War set, and so you can go in and search the Revolutionary War petitions. So here we see a petition to for something that was payable to Abigail Johnson of Connecticut and Massachusetts. We see that this was a pension request. And so you can see that the amount of the award that she got was $26.66. And so it's kind of interesting to go in and look at their pension requests and see what kind of what requests are made. We also have the Freedmen's Bank, and these records were set up so that the freed slaves could have a place to put their money that they could now earn. And so you'll see sometimes that the slaves' former owners were co-signers. You'll also see some cases where the slave didn't know how to write, and so there is an X in lieu of a signature. The records include the original image, but they also give you a typed transcript so you can go in and read it if you can't read the text. And then the last resource in Heritage Quest is the serial set. And these are selected petitions to the US government. This can help give you the story of what is going on in a certain time period. Notice when we did a search for South Dakota, we came up with a couple of results here that talk about relief of South Dakota Wheat Growers Association. And so you got to think, well, what was going on in that time period that there would be relief of the South Dakota Wheat Growers Association? And so you can actually go in and do some different searches. So, maybe not for a certain person, but for places or topics, and see what kind of information you can come up with. And so here we see excerpts of a first and last page of a memorial of the Oglala Sioux relative to affairs at Pine Ridge Agency, presented by R.F. Pettigrew, South Dakota's first senator. And the included signers on this one are Red Cloud and American Horse. And so this is an example of a document that you would find in the serial set in Heritage Quest. So the last resource that a subscription resource a state library provides that is a great primary resource are the Sanborn maps. These are the fire insurance maps. Unfortunately, there's only 82 South Dakota towns, so not every town in South Dakota is included. They cover the time periods from 1867 to 1970. And when we go in here and look, for example, we picked Pierre, and we're looking at November of 1898. All of the maps start out with the index sheet is sheet 1. And so if you are looking at a bigger community especially, you will want to look at the index to kind of figure out which map you should be looking at. When we zoom in, we've picked on the courthouse, and so you can see actually a description of the courthouse. There is, it heats with stoves. It shows you there's a prison, and the B stands for basement. So you have an idea of what, and then the you could also see what it's constructed of. In many cases, it'll tell you what the building is made of. It'll tell you if the building has stairs, an elevator, many kinds of information about the different buildings in a community. So it's a really interesting way to see what was there, what's there now, because you could look at, you know what's on this corner now, what was on that corner 100 years ago, type of thing. So it's a neat way to learn about those voices from the past using the state library resources. So let's see, any other resources here that I wanted to talk about before we wrap it up a little bit? I think I've covered most of the content on here. All of the state library resources are listed as you scroll down the DIGO page. They're towards the bottom of the page. And so you have all the state library resources. And then I also wanted to point out a couple of the other resources that are available. For South Dakota, recently, as a part of a grant, the South Dakota Historical Society digitized newspapers. And so as part of Chronicling America, which is part of the Library of Congress, we have newspapers from Canton, the Dakota Farmers Advocate, the Dakota Farmers Leader, Lincoln County Advocate, and the Canton Daily Leader, in addition to Yankton newspapers. And so if you click on this link here, it's going to take you over to the Chronicling America site with the South Dakota papers. And here again, It's one of those things that your community may not be part of the digitized content, but you can actually go in and you can use the content for more than just, the community. Maybe you want to go in and look at an image and see what the ads look like and how they talk about the ads. And some of them are going to be in better quality than others. And so here we're looking at the Canton Advocate. And so we could click on any one of these and see, maybe you just want to look at how the language has changed. How did they write about something in this era compared to how they would write about something now. The ads are a hoot. I was looking through newspapers and found just the funniest ads and how they were worded. And you think, how would that be worded today? So this can be a really neat resource to bring South Dakota content into your classroom. There's also some really great resources for online pictures in South Dakota. The Black Hills Knowledge Network partners with local libraries to bring in historical documents. Photogrammer is part of the Farm Security Administration and Office of War Information, and there are over 170,000 photographs from 1935 to 1945. But what's cool about this is you have the ability to go to this interactive map and pick your community or pick your region and see the map, the pictures from that time period and where they're at. And so if we go in and we zoom in, let's see if we can get it to load. And unfortunately, not every area has pictures. But like for Pennington County, for example, if I click on that, it says that I have 44 pictures. And so these are all pictures that were taken in Pennington County during that time period as part of that project. And so it's just a really neat way to go in and see what kind of pictures from the region. Hughes County, we have 7 pictures.
This is great stuff.
And so if you're looking for images, what a great way to go in and find those. So that's the Photogrammer. And then the Historic Black Hills Studios is the Fassbender Photographic Collections. And these have just tons of pictures of the Spearfish, Lee Deadwood, Black Hills. And this is just a fun one to go in and check out. Because they have a number of different galleries, and just to have, it's just mind-boggling all the content in here. So lots of different ways to bring South Dakota primary source documents into your classrooms. Other things, we have other South Dakota documents here. We have, I talked about the South Dakota State Library digital collections. There's the Digital Library of South Dakota, which is the university libraries have collaborated. And so there's a number of digitized resources from the university's libraries. We have the Center for Western Studies at Augustana, which has a number of great resources. And then we have the Deadwood History collections, which wonderful place to find some neat artifacts. They have more than just documents there. So let's see. So that is pretty much wrapping up my day. I do want to do a little bit of promo. If you want more on primary sources, when I talked about the Library of Congress, they recently had an online conference. It was last week, I believe. And they will be putting the archives to all these sessions up. And so that's going to be really exciting to be able to go back and view if you want more on primary sources. And then on November 20th from 9 to 1 Central Time, 8 to noon Mountain Time, the State Library is offering Digging Deeper into Primary Sources 2 in the morning. And we're featuring Keith Patterson. He's the project coordinator from the Library of Congress, and he spoke at our last Digging Deeper Day. They'll have Glenn Wiebe He is a social studies consultant from Kansas, and he's just a fabulous speaker. And then finally, we're also having Dr. Scott Simpson, and he's a learning specialist at TIE, and he's going to be talking about the Wola Lakota project and listening to the elders. And so I think it's going to be a really great day, and you can drop in for the whole day or stay for a session, so you don't have to stay the whole time. But do think about signing up for that, because it is a free professional development opportunity. So that is all of the primary source content that I think I can cover in this time period. Do you have any questions about anything that I talked about, Liz?
I'm just overwhelmed. There's so much here. I was writing down, and see, my husband is a social studies teacher. And so then I quick texted him. I said, "Can you come down?" I said, "Do you want to watch this with me?" And I think he's going to watch the recording. But sometimes he has, when I first saw the social study standards comes up, it was like, wow, because that's been a long time in the making. And the sources you showed, and we've been familiar with Thinkfinity and all of those before, but you kind of forget about them. And the lesson plans. I just love everything, and the ancestry thing is just what I was hoping to do. And you explained it too. We've got to do it here. But just before we got started too, I was looking at your links, and I love how you did them and that Digo, so we can actually click on them and go to those sites. But seeing what about your grandma, grandpa? Were they in the Army? Let's see if you can find their record,
Yes, yes.
Cool things like that. And we are iPads 8 through 12. So the site you showed that was iPad, and most places are really getting to be, they adjust to the different size screens and stuff. So lots of great materials. And I'll definitely share it with some teachers here. So.
Oh, good. Well, good. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad you were able to come, and that is really, really exciting. I'm going to, let's see, stop recording now. So thank you.